On. It looks like we are on. Hello, everybody. Sorry for the long delayed Gaytriarchy with Matthew C. and Spacepan. It turns out that whatever was going on with Matthew required a restart, and
Yeah.
I should have told him to do this earlier because I had thought of it earlier, but it was my fault. I didn't, at least in terms of the taking responsibility for the things that you could have done differently. That would have been better. And I should have said, let's try a restart. But whatever. It's very good to have him here. And so we're also here with Spacepan. Matthew,
Hello.
Hi.
Matthew, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself in case they well, here, I'll say what I would want to say about him. He is a YouTuber. He's young. Are you 19, 20?
19, yeah.
19. He's recently started going to a local college after being considerably anti-SJW type female to male trans guy, which he talks about on his channel a lot. And he kind of really hates trans trenders. He kind of really hates Chase Ross. He has a problem with certain things about Ash Hardell, but I don't notice it being the same level of vehement distaste as
Like Ash Fordell is actually a good person. Chase Ross is not.
Chase Ross is deeply twisted.
Yeah.
He has, I mean, the thing that particularly bugs me about him is he basically pulls the like female entitlement type thing, but transfers it over to trying to be a more or less homosexual male somehow. Like he thinks that uh, guys should just have sex with him because he deserves it or something. And it's like, I don't feel like that's a very, regardless as to whether or not trans guys can get gay sex, because I know some of them can, if that is what they are looking for. But I don't know if that's the best attitude to take, and especially not to encourage other trans guys who want to have sex with men to do that. I think that that's a real big problem. It causes a lot of animosity within the LGBTQ plus, and so
Yeah.
blah 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 blah. But what else would you like to say about yourself, Matthew?
Well, I'm trying to take my channel away from the identity politics kind of thing, like, just because I do understand that I get a little obsessed with it. So I'm trying to focus more on like mental health stuff, and I have a couple ideas for videos. It doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing the identity politics stuff, but yeah, trying to change the focus of my channel a little bit.
Okay. Is there anything else besides, okay, because like mental health stuff, identity politics stuff, do you have any ideas for stuff that's not gonna give you anxiety?
Yeah. Well, I have like ideas for response videos to things. Like I'm a fan, if you've seen a couple of my videos, I'm a fan of like creepy PSAs, and I don't know if you've seen the videos that I've done for that, but like, you know, public service announcements. It's like a community on YouTube of the people who just chronicle public service announcements. And so I've, tried my hand at a couple of videos, like ranking them from, least scary to most scary, or, whatever whatever the criteria is, because it's really interesting once you go down that rabbit hole.
Okay, yeah.
That'd make a really great tier list of just awful PSAs that are like really scary. I know exactly what you mean. Like they're really funny to go through.
Yeah, like there's scary ones, there's, sad ones, there's funny ones. It's like a whole, and I grew up with some of the PSAs, like from the real cost. I see those all the time, the anti-smoking ones. And also the Montana Meth Project had a lot of online PSAs, and some of them are done by like real movie directors and stuff. So
I mean, for the meth ones, you could just take a clip from most zombie movies, like dress it up a little. My favorite is when I was living in China, there was a bus we would take to go into like the main town, and like they would show you, they had like the TVs on the buses, and it would just show footages of bus crashes,
oh yeah, there's a couple
like
of
on a loop.
yeah, there's a couple of ones I've seen that are real footage of train crashes and people getting like. I mean, I have like a morbid fascination with like all this bad stuff happening, like people getting run over by trains and stuff. But
Yeah,
yeah,
well, and like the buses would play these ads, and I guess the idea was to get us to wear seatbelts, but like half the time the buses were really janky and didn't even have seatbelts anyway. So it's just like, why? And like they would show really horrific accidents that like you'd have no chance of surviving. Things are just like
yeah,
totally over the top. So it's like
That's funny.
great.
Matthew, I had proposed doing a video with you, which I think that we should actually do. And it was inspired by this talk with the three people who pranked the academic journals. One of the cool ones,
yeah. I saw that actually. Wasn't it called like the conceptual penis as a social construct? I read some of it. It's funny.
yeah, I mean, it was a pretty brilliant
Yeah.
move for them all to do. Whoever actually thought of the idea, I assume it's Peter Boghossian who came up with it. But then the other guy who was involved in the project said some really interesting, compelling stuff about how his problem with intersectionality was, well, not his only, but the first thing that came to mind was that he felt that it was mathematically inadequate because it's supposed to just be about these essentially two-dimensional lines or one-dimensional lines. I forget. I guess two-dimensional just lines, as opposed to what it should be if you were to use proper mathematics, which would be Venn diagrams. It should be
Right.
circles that overlap. And then as soon as you start thinking of it in that ways, you can realize, or in that way, you can realize just how inadequate the thing that they are using, just the simple line formula, actually is. Because, for example, what I was thinking is like, well, okay, so if they were to factor in class,
Right.
they basically just have it, are you rich or are you poor?
Yeah.
which is completely ridiculous. And all it does is to allow, you know, every feminist that's ever walked the earth to say they're lower class, because they do. They always say that. They're
Right.
always like, I'm working class. And it's like,
Well, the thing about that is like most college students can say that because most college students don't really have an income, but it really, like, being in college, you know, like that in and of itself is a privilege.
yeah,
And I mean, even if you're like a working class family on a scholarship or something, like not everybody gets that opportunity, and more often than not, it's your family is actually pretty well off and they can pay for you to go to college.
yeah, and you have that safety net and all that type of thing. It's like, okay, Persephone, I'm not
Yeah.
really sure that this is exactly what, you know, the Kimberly Crenshaw had in mind when she was trying to popularize this mathematically stupid little theory. So you could, though, if you were to try to make a proper intersectionality Venn diagram, you could have class circles, and it would be kind of like a target board, you know,
Right.
and it would just state, or it would just have different circles for how much money people were actually making, and in the middle would be, you know, like 200,000 or more per year, kind of like what they do on income taxes.
Right.
And then you could really actually get into a lot more depth with the intersectionality credit score or whatever. Now, I personally still think it's silly, because I just don't think that, coming up with a numerical system to calculate how hard anybody has it in life is worthwhile. That's just a very strong personal opinion of mine.
Yeah.
But it would be a lot more helpful, and it would point out how silly it is.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. Like trying to use a mathematical system to determine just how oppressed you are is, um, yeah, it's just not like that doesn't come from good intentions, so
Yeah,
Well,
no,
that's literally how welfare systems operate now.
really.
Like you go into the welfare office, yeah, they're totally calculating like how worthy you are. And
Does
like
it,
often they are taking into account like things like your race,
huh? And
I,
and if you're non-binary,
stuff like that, yeah.
um um sorry, uh lost my train of thought. um yeah, but like, even if it also doesn't take into account with, using the example again of college, like my family is pretty well off, so we don't qualify for financial aid, but at the same time, like we can't pay to go to a private college, because that's like what, $200,000 for a bachelor's degree. My family just doesn't have that kind of money just lying around, so it has limited. Like I'm probably going to transfer to a public school because otherwise I'm going to be mired down in student debt, which probably will be anyway because I'm planning on going to graduate school. But like even upper class or middle class, like there's still some nuance there, even if you aren't poor, and
yeah.
that's something that intersectionality doesn't take into account.
Yeah, and I think that that's really deliberate. Like I only view intersectionality, like anybody who's actually gonna think in terms of what's reasonable, what's fair, and they would be individualists ultimately. You know what I mean? And intersectionality is just basically a way of loading the deck to ensure that whoever is the proponent of these theories gets to like have a formula to make it so that they can tell you to shut up.
Yeah. Well, I really liked that video you sent me that you were talking about earlier, because they really just dissect and draw parallels to how it's like a religion. It's
Yeah, it's called "Is Intersectionality a Religion?" and it was
yeah,
a talk at PSU. And there's a lot of, I mean, it's pretty undeniable. I think the only shortcoming is that it's not really something that you can state as uh having a deity necessarily, because there is no universal deity.
yeah, I think that was one of the questions they asked. They said, like, what would the God be and what would the Savior be in this parallel? And I said, there's not really one. Like, whatever political person they try to rally behind, it kind of becomes that for a while. But
Yeah. And then they throw them under the bus inevitably when it turns out they didn't make the world perfect, like they're doing to, which they're doing to Obama now. Like
yeah,
all of the sudden, the people who were like best president ever, he's perfect. Oh my god! Now they're like, well, no, I mean, he bombed people in the Middle East, and it's like, yeah, while you pretended it didn't happen
yeah,
to the bitter end.
It kind of makes sense though. Is like as soon as you replace one Jesus with another Jesus, like that by itself is already like being a Judas to the first Jesus. So it all seems very consistent.
Yeah.
Not that they realize what they're doing, but
So, speaking about religion, the hot topic of debate, the thing that is just reinvigorating the feminist spirit all across our nation. It has given them something to fight for. They are either pulling out their hair, or they are, or the professionals are like, "Oh my God, thank God, thank God, thank God." They have this basically, I don't know, unconstitutional, but law in Alabama where Trump actually came out in opposement to it. He thinks that it is unfair. The law states that okay, they're trying to say that it's outlawing all abortions, but that's actually not true. They are outlawing abortions after the point in which the baby fetus thing that is within the woman has a heartbeat. So that gives them about 5 weeks to abort, which is by no means the end of the world if you just grow some big girl pants and realize, okay, there's consequences for these actions. I can get pregnancy tests. I have to maybe think about morning after pills and even an abortion within the first 5 weeks. I know you don't think that you should ever have to do anything that you don't totally want to do, but this has put the entire left into a tizzy, and all of the sudden, women are oppressed. They're so oppressed. They're so oppressed. They're so oppressed. And of course, if you were to say something like, and this is actually what I think people should do, and I'm going to make a video about this called Men on Strike, which is that we have absolutely no reason to give a crap about this. And I think that if we were to show feminists, hey, theoretically, considering this is actually an excessive law that will probably get overturned on its own, but, it should be argued that, hey, this is against the Supreme Court rulings and it's totally absurd to force incest and rape survivors to actually carry to term these babies that are inside of them. If you're going to try to get men to care about that, why can't you consider even vaguely giving a crap about men? And I've proposed this notion, and they flip out. The level of entitlement coming from feminists, like they simply haven't realized. Because okay, the attitude of women and women first that was perpetuated, especially during the fourth wave of feminism, it was never logical. It was never rational. It's always been powered by this notion of like, look, we have tyrannical control in the education system with Obama, and it's like either shape up or get out of our way. We'll send you to jail and me to you or something. Is basically their whole attitude. And now they actually might be in a situation where they could benefit from gaining some allies, and it is just beyond their means. They have no capacity to even attempt to try.
Yeah, look, if they if they want someone to, if they want men to ally with them, it's it's important that and I don't mean ally like in the SJW, like you have to do everything I say ally, but if they want men to support them, they need to be considerate that men have rights issues too, and yeah, that's something they're just ignoring.
Yeah, they don't necessarily want allies when they say so. They want mercenaries, not mercenaries. They want enlisted help from troops or something. It's not an allying relationship. An allying relationship is when both parties choose they want to achieve this shared goal together.
What I find interesting about it is that when it comes to the whole issue of pregnancy and maternity, very often women are willing to take all the laurels of like, oh, I carried this inside me and it's been part of me and I have all this whole experience and it's transcendental and the divine woman and all that stuff, right? But with this heartbeat bill, well, one thing that I think not a lot of people realize is that like most people kind of drink really heavily And most women also don't realize that they get pregnant right away. And I don't think a lot of people put two and two together and realize that this means like probably the majority of children have some sort of damage, right? From like drinking when even in those first few weeks. And it strikes me as a little bit hypocritical that generally speaking, you're not allowed to question this idea that women, should give given credit for their role in, producing children, but then at the same time, we're not able to say that that comes with a responsibility where, you have to actually think very clearly about your intentions with using your body to create another human life. And the heartbeat bill, I think, forces women to make that choice right away because otherwise, it's really wishy-washy. Like they're probably gonna like maybe they're gonna drink because they think, oh, I'll abort it later, or they just haven't noticed yet, and this really forces them to think like this is a serious thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't. It, I just I really really blame the culture of feminism for, as we were talking about with the MGTOW guests that we had on last week. They have trained women that equality means everything feminists want at every given moment. Like it's our way or the highway, shape up or ship out. And if you don't agree with us, we'll ruin your life. And, you know, it totally cripples their ability to not only get allies like I was talking about, but to actually think about just how to be decent people in any way. It's like they were basically activated as this horde of completely entitled irrational people to be the social henchmen of the progressives. And they were like, oh cool, so I get everything I want as long as I join this sisterhood. And they're like, yep. And now it's not coming true and they don't know what to do. It's like, but we were promised, you know.
Well, yeah, everything's been cultivated in one direction. It's consciousness raising, right? And there's always this implication that women were like put down and they were lower. So there's never a question of if it's going to have some sort of give and take, which is how a normal relationship would work, because there's some level of negotiation and compromise, and you don't always get your way. But the rhetoric that's always been, thrown at women is, well, you're lower, so we need to raise up your consciousness, and we need to, empower you. It's always a language of moving in one direction. So it's not terribly surprising that, that when you look at the situation objectively and realize like, wow, like women haven't really been challenged to develop any sort of tools, going the other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a shame, most pro-life people are women, like the majority of them are. And you tell that to the feminists, like it's so amazing how feminists just they had decided either some point in their life or at the very latest some point by like 2014 2015 that they were just right about everything and that they would never be faced with a intellectual challenge or anything, and they figured it was all settled, and now it's just if you're not a feminist you're a sexist. And you can tell them, well, you're deciding this is not about necessarily about women's wishes. This is about your wishes, because most pro-life people are women and they have never heard that, and they don't believe you. They think you're just making crap up.
Yeah, because to them, those women are like Uncle Toms, like, oh, how can you be a woman and possibly have a belief opposed to mine?
Yeah, well, and no, but they also just literally think that you're lying when you tell them that. And that I think that's kind of telling of like how unprepared they are to deal with anything.
Well, and I think this came up last week, this idea of like abortion regret, that sometimes they are regretful of their abortion. And then, once they've made that decision, the only way for them to kind of maintain that security, especially, you know, if they have a moral sense that's very much based in like social attitudes. All they can really do at that point is double down and convince other women to go along with what they're saying, because that's where they're looking for that validation. And
Yeah.
it's very sick, you know, that there really should be more honesty, because if they're serious about being pro-choice, well, that means being really sensitive to both sides of that choice and really giving people honest information and not polluting the discourse with this idea that, you know, you should shout your abortion, and that the only reason any woman would regret that or feel shame for it is because society has told her that she doesn't own her own body. And they even use that hypercharged rhetoric of like, they basically they insinuate that all pro-life people are rapists,
Mhm.
you know. And I don't let that go. Anytime I see that, I call that out. Is that you're calling people rapists? I put it exactly in those terms, because the fact that that became like the go-to phrase and that people just casually pick that up is absolutely despicable.
Yeah. I also really find it despicable the way that they can't let go of the notion that they think it's men controlling women's bodies, when like they refuse to even acknowledge that other people see it as a person. Like, it's just so messed up, you know. It's like you can't even admit what their actual argument is enough to, like, and that's where it comes into these like insane delusions with these people, where you tell them, hey, these most of the people who are pro-life activists, pro-life politicians, um you know, pro-life voters are women. And they're like, no, it's just men trying to control women's bodies. And they're like, and then you're like, no, but did you just hear what I said about how most pro-life people are women? And they're like, that's not true. And I think that they really believe that. I think it's never actually occurred to them that that's just true.
Well, they're also the first people who, if you try to flip the conversation into male reproductive rights, they'll immediately double think into, well, men should just keep it in their pants.
Yeah.
You know, and then they won't even realize I've had cases where I try to explain to them, like, what if I said that about women? They're like, well, that'd be horrible. And I'm like, do you see what's happening here? And they like, it's literally like the most real double think. There's a barrier between two different minds they have
Mhm.
about it.
And I think when it comes to stuff like circumcision too, they're like, well, it's not as bad as female genital mutilation, when actually, you know, it depends on the type. And they're like, it's not comparable. But the truth is, like, at least in the US, women have they don't have to be subject to genital mutilation, but many baby boys do, and just feminists act like it's not the same thing, when in fact there is an inequality in that regard. I mean, I don't know if you would count that as a reproductive right, but it's similar.
Spacepan in particular is very, very passionate about circumcision rights.
Yeah, well, it's a really great it's a great starting issue. It's my favorite one move checkmate, because if you understand that issue and address it in appropriate terms, it really frames everything. You know, like the thing I always point out is, if you're looking at the United States, infant males are the primary victims of sexual violence. And I feel like that's like just an undeniable, indisputable fact that's insanely easy to prove. And then how does that reflect upon our society when we've allowed adult women to act like sexual violence is this number one issue for them, and just completely sweeping, you know, their infant male victims under the rug?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny too. Like, okay, I was thinking about like every single like quote unquote women's issues. If anyone's familiar with the program here, we basically don't really think that there are legitimate women's issues. Like, this thing in Alabama kind of borders on one existing, but it'll get solved. You know, like, don't worry about that. Um, with every women's issue, there's dramatically more comparable and more important male issue. And when you even bring that up, you face the wrath of these women who, like, the overcompensation for the thing that they have to deal with. Like, it's like they're trying, like, they simply cannot bring themselves to even possibly empathize with male issues, so that when you say, hey, I'm not going to care about this thing in Alabama that's like almost as far away from me as I could possibly live, it's not important to me, you don't care about male issues that affect every male in every state, it seems like this horrifically bad thing, because anything that could possibly affect them is the literal only thing that they care about, to the point where it's like, it just baffles the mind. My eldest sister used to tell me this story about when my other sister and I were little, uh, and I guess she got in trouble for doing something, and they actually spanked her, which I think that they must have never done before. They certainly spanked me enough when I was even smaller than her, and I've told those stories enough. My sister was more deserving of being spanked than I was, but they would apparently not spank her. Well, they spanked her, and apparently she just froze with shock, and she was like that for so long that she actually passed out. And
That's insane.
yeah, and it was just this like, oh my god, but you can't, no, and I think that it's just a sign of the excessive and just, if there's anything that's dehumanizing to women, it's treating them like a gender aristocracy, where they can't even fathom what being treated like an actual person is.
Yeah, look, that infantilization is very prevalent, and I think one thing that SCWs don't get is they think like any movement that claims to support a certain minority group or something, they think that literally represents all of that group. Like, I remember I was commenting on a Steve Shives video years ago, and somebody was like, oh, you're a racist, you're a sexist because you don't support feminism and you don't support Black Lives Matter. And I just wrote, Black Lives Matter does not equal Black people. Feminism does not equal women.
Yeah, absolutely not.
That's literally what they think. Like, they think that these specific ideologies represent all of that group.
Yeah, and it's weird too, because it's like, I think they have to kind of know that that's just I know there has to be a word for, like a bait and switch misleading title that doesn't actually really reflect the dramatic majority of people. Like, feminists hate Black men, they can't stand Black men, and like, as a whole. And it's like very obviously why, like, the dramatic majority of Black men are pretty antithetical to feminism in terms of like how they behave, what motivates them, and their willingness to just be completely self-sacrificing for ultimately upper middle class women that feminism serves, because it's just a thing for a upper to middle class aristocracy, and to sort of give lower class women a bunch of self-righteousness that ultimately makes them annoying. That's all it really offers, and they kind of know that, but they are just so dead set on having the self-righteousness on their side that they will, try to vehemently attack anybody that might potentially threaten it by stating their truth, and be like, hey, Black Lives Matter doesn't help Black people. It seems to only really help college students and the feminists who are in charge of it, and they'd be like, you know, some white female who's like 23 would call them a Uncle Tom for saying
Right.
that, you know.
And I think part of the reason feminism doesn't like black men is because it disrupts their like I mentioned this in my intersectionality video, but like it they I think that there's a good argument that can be made that black men have it significantly harder than black women, and of course that disrupts the intersectionality narrative that black women are super oppressed because they're black and they're women. So I think just the existence of black men, and you know, subsequent issues that come with being a black man, like that man, like that disrupts the intersectionality narrative. You get what I'm trying to say? Like the
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if you actually apply intersectionality appropriately, like it's definitely obvious that black men have it much worse than black females. And then, you know, you look at the black community and it's become essentially a matriarchy. And if you're really honest about most of what are called black issues, they're really male issues that tend to affect black men disproportionately more. So I would maintain that, yeah, predominantly it's the male axis that's in play there. But yeah, can you just respond to it? So Plato's making this accusation, Plato Emerson in the chat, that generalizing about SJWs is the same thing as generalizing about people based on sex or race.
Yeah, I just want to say,
And it's
everybody who's listening, Plato is essentially a troll. He comes to my chat a lot, and he is consistently a disruption and consistently contrary. I don't know why he would come for so long and never get like any of the talking points, or at least pretend like he hasn't, you know, to the point where it's likely that he's one of these weird fictitious people just being annoying. The ideology of SJW is basically shorthand for intersectional feminism. Intersectional feminism, social justice have all been dog whistles for the United States Communist Party. And the social justice became a dog whistle in the 60s or maybe even the 50s, when you weren't supposed to be openly communist. And so there's this particular set of identity politics oriented agenda items. And they are very uniform. It will always be women, and black women in particular are the most holy. Anything that disrupts that will be demonized. Whoever's raised their hand to say, hey, I'm a black male, I have it worse because of, you know, the huge laundry list of reasons. And the agenda here isn't to say, oh, black men have it worse, blah 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 blah, but anytime somebody steps up and disrupts the narrative, they will attack that person because it is a very uniform, prescriptive agenda of what they want to glorify by claiming that it has the most oppression points. If we were dealing with rational people, then they would be able to talk about certain issues and think about things. But this is, as we were just talking about, essentially a religion. And so it is more than acceptable to generalize about these people, especially considering the fact that it is a relatively recent religion, so they are all dead set on being completely uniform.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it's a way of thinking. It's a style of thought. So like, of course you can generalize on how they're thinking. Like the comparison wouldn't be to saying this is how all black people think. The comparison would be to saying black people tend to have darker skin than white people, right? And like SJWism is defined by their thoughts and their attitudes. So of course that's the angle in which you can generalize about them.
And there's so many kind of subsets of intersectionality. Like if you look at a college majors list, you know, you'll find like women's studies, gender studies, queer theory, critical race theory, that kind of stuff. But it all comes back to the same thing.
Yeah, they're not actually different. It's just
yeah. If you look at like male studies, it's really just it's feminism just repackaged as toxic masculinity. Men need to get in touch with their emotions. Here's a bunch of just toxic homosexuals who are going to tell men about how their normal sexuality is totally messed up.
Um, yeah, yeah,
It ain't,
absolutely.
it ain't Warren Farrell
And
masculine studies like
by the
that.
way, Plato, if you're here for discourse, it's really amazing that you've m- magically forgotten everything I've ever said, everything my guests have ever said, everything my co-hosts has ever said by the time you show up again. It's really as if you're consciously trying. And if you keep going, I will put you on timeout. I'd like
He
to.
might just be a contrarian. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's his level of thick-headedness is, off the charts.
Is he just like trolling for attention and trying to be
Oh, he's an older gay guy who was offended. He found me through Chadwick Moore, and he thought that I was saying something that Chadwick was saying that I don't even think I didn't say it at all, or I wasn't committed to saying it, and he was obsessed with arguing me for a long time until he realized that I was like mostly right about everything. And then he shows up a lot, but continues to like try to argue with me, even though he then usually says, okay, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. It's just annoying.
It's a little dance. It's a little chat dance. That's all.
Yeah. Well, it could actually be full on trolling.
A little waltz. So one step this way, two steps another. And then next week we're in the same spot.
Okay, Plato. I will not let you distract me or the chat.
Here, let me open up the actual chat. Sorry, I can't see it from here, so I have to go to the YouTube page. I just want to see what he's saying.
Yeah. Oh, no. I put him on chat. You can't see it anymore. So, okay, we will actually have a talk. He does this. It is a trolling tactic. That's what they do. He's trying to derail. It's a deliberate thing. They actually pay people to do that. I don't know if he's one of them, but they do pay people to do that.
Well, I think they should get their money back. If
Yeah.
being paid to do it, I think it'd be a little bit more robust. I think maybe he's just a little contrarian, but
Yeah.
do you guys want to talk about James Charles?
But you're a contrarian, so I can understand why you would have that. Empathizing with the situation, because it's like, well, I sort of do that sometimes, but
Yeah, and I really get under people's skin too. I don't know how I do it. Like I'm not trying to.
yeah, but you're not, consistently wrong all the time, and just like you don't ever get to the point where you say, actually, never mind, I agree with you. Yeah, and then show up the next time as if you never heard a single thing. Like you wouldn't do that.
Right.
And that's what this guy's a serial offender. So, and Alejandro, I'm gonna make you a promote you to being a moderator. If he comes back, put him immediately on timeout. Okay. So
Even I don't have a wrench. Why don't I have a wrench?
here you go.
Which I thought is that an ANCAP joke? Is like, oh well, you're against governance, so you can't have a wrench.
Yeah, no, it's like, I don't really think about moderators that much because I normally like to hear from people, and but if somebody, can derail us for well over 5 minutes debating whether or not that was his intention, which he's repeatedly done a bunch of times, it's like this guy needs to go. It's not okay for my stream to be like that. I do have jurisdiction for a reason.
Yeah,
So,
there's kind of a sweet period where any sort of stream is like still small enough that you can get away with like just having things kind of just be out and open in the wild, but then eventually you reach a point where you need just a little bit of that moderation to balance it out.
Yeah, you know, I mean, for all we know, he's like a 25-year-old straight guy who's like, oh my God, I got him going. So, okay, we got to like actually move on.
Okay.
Do you guys want to talk about James Charles?
Yes.
I honestly don't care about James Charles at all. Like,
I didn't want to care, but it's been everywhere. And like it is a little bit insane to look at just the sheer volume of like people looking at it and caring about it. And
it's
it is funny because it's this weird thing where like the whole drama community has become this like super like mainstream thing that's in everybody's focus right now.
it's like the whole Logan Paul thing. Like I honestly don't care about like these big name YouTubers who, like, frankly, I don't think they make very good content, so I've never really cared. I understand like James Charles got some attention because he was on CoverGirl, but
Oh, is he the same guy? I totally
Yeah.
didn't make the
yeah,
connection. Oh, you're right. Yeah, it's the same face. That's right.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, maybe there's a little intrigue then. But yeah, it's I've been like trying to watch all these like drama videos. Like first I was watching like Toddy's video, then I was watching his video, then I was watching Jeffree Star's video, and I was watching fucking Perez Hilton's take on it. I just like my brain is just
Don't swear, by the way.
chunks of oh sorry,
Yeah.
just frickin' hecking.
Yeah,
Just
I want to be just about the swearing. I want to try to be consistent because my streams always get demonetized, and you know we could stop that. So, um, but yeah, it is a interesting drama. You know who was trying to get me into it was Brian from Honey Badgers. I guess for some reason he was like hoping that I would have some whopping commentary, but I never exactly figured what was the angle that I was personally supposed to care about it myself, but I am completely willing to explore.
So it does get interesting because at face value, you look at it and you're like, oh, it looks like maybe he did something kind of crappy and now there's backlash and it's whatever. But it turns out this seems to be a case of kind of like a Me Too by proxy. It
Mm.
seems like really, you know, it's sort of in this what I'm going to start calling the Weinstein gray area, where like these are things that aren't really illegal, but they're a little bit unsavory. But even to paint it in that light, I think is a little bit too severe, right? And I think, you know, he made his gay little apology video, which I think that proportional to what he's been accused of, I think is fine, especially in light of so many of this controversy started with it started over vitamins. It started over vitamins, and you have this like middle-aged 30s-year-old woman who's like trying to promote beauty stuff, and he's promoting something that's not her vitamins. So she's like, I'm gonna destroy him. I'm gonna destroy him. And she painted this whole narrative and like really made it this extra dramatic thing. And then after she throws it out there, all of these other people in this drama beauty sphere just start hopping on the bandwagon and posting all kinds of things. Like you had this like Sarah Larson or whatever, this like singer.
Wait, can we
post-
first unpack the Tati or Tatu, whatever her name is,
Tati.
Tati part of
Yeah,
it?
yes.
Because I want to make sure I got it all correct from my memory. So
Yeah.
the thing is that I remember is that James Charles is he's this like fresh sensation to the beauty makeup tutorial world. The beauty industry is, I guess, what they call it. And he moved to LA or whatever. I think definitely LA. And he was signed pretty young. And Tati took him under her wing and showed him the ropes and set him up with, I don't know, a talent agent and all, you know, all the proper things that you would need to get your little thing career in makeup tutorials going. And so, and you know, considering the fact that he was like 17 at the time, that's actually a really, really big deal. You would be very, very loyal to this person. And then eventually she sells some sort of vitamins, or she's sponsored, or maybe she even has her own vitamin line. And he promoted on his channel one of her competitors.
Yeah, basically. And he had this whole story about how like they were trying to get into Coachella and they had a security issue or something, and then they offered him a contract. And she's saying that's a bunch of crap and that it had to have been planned beforehand. But it seems like I don't know. I guess it's kind of undetermined. Um, yeah.
Do you have automatic, because okay, then she made some video about how betrayed she felt trying to you know, pile on the female sympathy waterworks and everything. Do you have an immediate knee-jerk reaction assuming that she's must be pulling a toxic femininity?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's implicit in just the form of how she's going about it, which is the number one criticism of her is if you have this personal beef with him, you should go to him in private. She's putting him on blast out of revenge.
Mm.
It's petty revenge, is what it is.
Uh-huh. And then from there, it started branching out to allegations of him being kind of rapey, and in particular towards straight guys or something.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I know about the drawing was that he was being like predatory towards straight guys, or like trying to trick straight guys into sleeping with him. I mean, I don't know if those allegations have any foundation,
Foundation.
Hmm.
Because
Well,
makeup, get it?
yeah, yeah. So, what do you think, Spaceman?
Well, there's a few different like stories, and it turns out most of them have been either completely baseless or completely false. But there's not nothing. There's not nothing there. Um, like you had this singer who tweeted about like, oh, he sent messages to my husband, and it turns out these quote unquote messages were like comments on like publicly posted photos and like one DM, and then she retracted the tweet after it got like 500 million views or whatever, and somebody
Oh,
else just completely made a story up and then said, oh, that was just a social experiment, and then you had
oh my
they had
God.
Jeffree Star involving themselves just because they wanted to just get attention, basically, which was like really funny because Jeffree Star is like a gay dude who's in like a relationship with a formerly straight man, so it's kind of I don't know, it's kind of the same thing. I mean,
Huh.
I think that the most damning thing that I found was there were some DMs where he like told a guy like no, like you're not straight, right? And after the guy was insisting that he was or whatever, and
Well, yeah, we don't know why he was saying that though.
that's yeah, and he also here's another thing too to keep in mind is James Charles came out and said that he's a virgin, which is a brilliant move, right? Because if a man says they're a virgin, you're gonna believe them, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
um yeah, and then there's the story that Toddy brought up about this waiter, and I guess James Charles made some lewd comments about him, and I guess these comments were so vulgar and so inappropriate that poor Toddy had to call all of her friends from her birthday party the morning after to apologize and make excuses for him and to say, "I am so sorry that he acted that way." Blah 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 blah.
Oh,
Um,
I side against him. Or no, Tati. I'm starting to realize she sucks.
It's so yeah, like the way I see it is like when it comes to her, it's really obvious that she's in the wrong, and then with him, it's kind of more dubious. But it really seems like the backlash he's gotten is more than well, I mean, I guess beyond disproportionate.
Yeah,
And
no,
he's
it
a young
seems
guy
like
too. He's like 19.
yeah, he's really young. Seems like she's totally using her superior understanding of the industry, using her female privilege to leverage against this guy that she has. Like I understand why somebody would do it in terms of that betrayal, but couldn't you like not start making suspect allegations about his personal life in the climate of Me Too? Instead of like purposefully milking that because you know it's a weak point as he's a male.
Yeah, and either that doesn't occur to her or she knows exactly what she's doing.
I think she absolutely knows exactly what she's doing.
It's like she's double his age. And she likes to LARP as like I'm like his mother, blah blah blah, right? And it's like if insofar as that should be the case, you'd think that she'd kind of be more of the adult in the situation.
This kind of reminds me of the whole. I think Prince, when you you started making videos, like one issue that you really cared about was that there were some feminists accusing gay men of regularly sexually assaulting
Yeah,
women.
that
This
was
kind of
the thing that inspired me to make my
yeah, that kind of these allegations kind of you know kind of have the same tone to them, like just portraying gay men as predatory.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that goes all the way back to like when if you've ever seen the Boys Beware PSA, have you ever seen that?
Is it the one from the 1950s with?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
Was that the one the Boy Scouts made, or is this a different one?
I think it's one with like there's a kid named Jimmy and the guy like shows him porn to get him aroused and then takes him back to a hotel eventually or a motel or whatever eventually.
Yeah, it's basically conflating being gay with being a pedophile. Like it's like I forget what the name of the pedophile was, but it was like what Jimmy didn't know was that he was a homosexual. And then they're like replacing the word pedophile with homosexual.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing too, is like with James Charles, like the idea of him like approaching kind of like flirting with coming after a straight man, like what straight guy doesn't see that coming? When you
Yeah.
just look at him, right? Like it's kind of like the signals are there. And I just feel like what it is it's like we had this really, really childish, low standard that we've been holding women to, and now we're just sort of applying that to men. Which I guess that's not the worst. I guess it's okay that people are kind of like seeing men as legitimate victims somehow. But I find it hard to believe that if this were a situation of like like for example like a woman coming onto a gay man that way, like would that be seen as some horrible affront that you could sabotage her career over? I think that in that light people would kind of see it as this really overblown thing. What I'm thinking is maybe the solution is we need to just raise the age of consent. I think that now that 30 is the new 20, I guess 28 needs to be the new 18. You should not be allowed to have any sex until you're like almost 30. It's just clearly as a society, we've pushed childhood out too far. So we're gonna have to make our age of consent laws reflect that.
Uh, so I was thinking about it. One of the things so I was actually assuming that James Charles actually maybe did some of these things and was trying to abuse his power to somehow. But
He
now that
made out with the waiter. He did make out with the waiter.
but now that I'm thinking about it, it's like I don't actually believe that he did anything that was particularly predatory. Like I can believe him being kind of slightly creepy in just that like not there's a difference between predatory creepy and just like ick creepy, and I'm thinking more like ick creepy, you know what I'm saying? And but there is that thing that happens with gay guys who are particularly feminine and who do completely, they might as well be trans but they haven't actually transitioned. They are culturally female, and those guys do often end up being attracted to primarily straight guys because gay guys aren't into them, and then straight guys like everybody finds those guys non-threatening. Like the last thing anybody is worried about is like one of those guys overpowering them and butt sexing them, you know what I mean? And I think that a lot of those guys and straight guys end up finding themselves when most straight guys think about being curious about their sexuality, they think of being attracted to a gay guy who's pretty like a girl. And so it does put guys in this weird position And the gay guy, he puts him in this weird position where he doesn't know how to actually attract gay men because they gets used to being around all these hot straight guys, and thinking that, you know, maybe something will happen.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. And like that's kind of another irony too, is in these beauty circles in this whole sphere, you know, they're really big on the language of like being accepting of different identities and expressions and blah blah blah. But I mean, I don't know, it seems like when push comes to shove, they're kind of shaming this idea that like a straight man might want to experiment with these like hyper feminine female presenting gay men.
Mm.
It kind of goes to the age old question: are traps gay?
Yeah, it can be definitely brought up. I never quite understand the question though. I'm always like,
Well, I don't know what a trap is at this point. Like I've been told like three different definitions. Like either it's like a super feminine gay guy who dresses like a girl to trick straight men, or it's like a pre-op trans woman, or something else.
mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, if you're just now joining us, you can certainly hit that like button, share it out, and you can consider doing a super chat if you want us to change different subjects, because I think that we have kind of beaten this one to death. Also, I'm remembering that I am currently very low on funds till late July. I'm actually going to consider trying to do some Postmates, send things to people who want me to go do their thrifting for them or whatever. But, you know, it'd be nice to. I'm also offering writing services. This is a pay service. It's not free, but you can pay me. I will give you feedback. I will help edit. I will even ghostwrite things for you. I just did one week or two ago. The guy seemed very happy. He's actually a repeat customer, so that means I'm doing something right. That'll cost you, but you know, $25 for a good long feedback session with a trained, quote unquote, professional. And it's actually not all that bad if you are interested in such a thing. All right, so what should we be talking about now? I think Matthew seemed eager to change the subject.
Well, all of this drama happened right on the heels of the whole pro Jared thing, but that's already kind of been done to death.
Pro Jared?
I haven't been in the loop about what that is.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Really, the tea is spilling all around you, and you're just like not noticing any of it. Do you guys even use the internet? Come on. So Pro Jared, it was like a gaming YouTube channel, and there was a big scandal that blew up. First, it was about him like cheating on his wife because his wife like went public with all this crap, right? And he made like a bad apology video. Now making apology videos and then ranking them is like the new thing. It's like the new mukbang is your apology video. Um, but it turns out like they probably were in like a polyamorous relationship and she knew about all of that. So even she's not really blameless. But then the real part of the scandal was that he had a server where he was like soliciting photos from fans and exchanging photos and stuff. And so that was a big thing. And
Well,
the reason it was relevant to James Charles was because James Charles snatched his record for immediately losing subscribers with his non-controversy.
Well, when I heard Pro Jared, I immediately thought, like, what is that, Pro Jared football or something? But
No, these are no now pro means professional sports, which is esports. Esports are the new sports
okay,
because we're in clown world. This is the new sports.
Yeah, I like esports. I mean, in the way that I like to play the video games. Every time it's actually on, I get very bored very quickly in general.
No, sports are awful. Oh, Eurovision happened. Do you guys want to talk about Eurovision?
Oh, yeah, you did want to talk about that. Matthew, do you follow Eurovision? I don't, just for the record. Matthew?
I don't follow Eurovision.
No, Matthew's
Okay,
American.
but
You guys
I
are
know that there. Okay,
Americans.
the only thing I know about it is that Iceland was protesting Palestine or protesting Israel in favor of Palestine because they are good white allies or whatever. It's the only thing I know.
Yeah, Iceland was very woke. Iceland was very woke this year. And they kind of had like their B version of Rammstein was basically their entry. It's like very, very gay, like metalish BDSM gear thing. It was very just the epitome of edge. And it's an okay song. The song doesn't sound bad. And like if it had just been that song and that entry just speaking for itself, like I think that would have been fine. But the artist, the band behind it is so pretentious, and they're out there in their interviews talking about how they're going to smash capitalism and how being part of this very capitalist contest in Israel to promote this idea and to spread a message. Their song is called "Hatred Will Prevail," right? And that's this
Whoa.
whole thing. Yeah. So it was very edgy. There's the epitome of edgers, but they're not ironic about it. Like that's their actual message that they think unironically. And one of the band members is like the son of like some ambassador to the EU or whatever. Like it's so yeah, they're basically Antifa the band.
Hmm.
A lot of Icelandic people were like really crossing their fingers that this would be the year Iceland wins, and I think there probably was a potential for that. Um, Australia had an awesome entry too. They had this like opera song where like these women were on these like stilt type things and like harnesses and like swinging around, and they made the stage look like the globe. So it was like they were like angels going around in the sky with all this like crazy vocals and everything. It was like super over the top. But of course, no, the song that wins is this like boring, awful ballad from the Netherlands. And literally, the only reason it won is because all of the people who vote are women and gays. And in the music video, he was naked. That's my theory. That's
Oh,
my hot take.
okay.
He's naked in the music video, and they voted for his butt cheeks. 6 points per cheek.
Were they
That was it.
were they all
That's
right butt cheeks?
Oh no, yeah, he's very attractive. He has a good body and everything. So if that's your jam, but it's this very yeah, the song I think was very kind of dull. Like not terrible, but it's really hard for songs at Eurovision to find that balance because like there's enough songs in the competition that you have to do something kind of interesting to get noticed. But like when you go too out there, then people start like not getting it and they think it's really weird. Like Portugal is a really good example of that. You could just look up images of the Portuguese entry and it was like just like shockingly bad. I don't understand how anyone likes it.
Hmm.
Um but yeah. I,
Okay.
I,
So
I was hoping Australia would win, but they didn't. I'm always disappointed though. Eurovision is just season 8 of Game of Thrones every year.
What were you about to say, Matthew?
so is Eurovision just all of the or all the sort of number of countries in Europe and then Australia submitting? Like I'm not sure exactly quite how the contest works.
Yeah, so it started like way back in the 50s, and basically each country gets to send one song and then they all compete. And it started off with like 5 countries, and now it's like 40 almost, or like high 30s or whatever. And it's any country that's part of the European Broadcasting Union can submit an entry. So that's how Israel is in the competition, and
But
some other like, Middle Eastern countries can get in it. And Australia,
yeah,
um,
even
yeah, they were added to it in like 2013, I think was the first year. And it was supposed to be like a one-off thing. It was supposed to be here's we're just gonna let you guys be in it one year because Australia has a really big fandom for the contest. It's like they have like a history of people who get up super early in the morning to all watch it when it happens live. They're kind of like the opposite of America, whereas like Americans don't even know that it exists, even though it's basically the next biggest thing after the Super Bowl, like as far as like global like events that people all watch. So it's really funny that in America we have absolutely no idea that it even exists. But yeah, so Australia after they did it one year, it kind of just became a thing where it was like, well, they've already been in it, so let's just let them stay. So, so Australia's just been in it since then, the past several years.
Yeah. And so would you say it got more or less social justicey after last year?
I'm not sure if there's really a change of that. The thing is they technically political messages aren't allowed. And people were speculating that Iceland was going to get banned based on that, but they kind of just I guess it wasn't in your face enough. Like they're talking about what they think the song means in interviews and outside of the contest, but that doesn't really make the bar for like a political statement at the contest. Um there were sometimes like one time Georgia got banned because they sent this like awesome cheesy like disco number. And it was the year that Russia was hosting the contest, and it was "We Don't Want to Put In," which is like "We don't want to Putin."
Oh.
And it was I love that song. Everybody thought it was so bad. It's like one of my favorite songs.
Hmm.
So it was like a hidden political message.
Yeah, but it was like really it was really obvious. Like they say, "I'm about to shoot in some boogie tonight," and they do like a gesture like they're shooting themselves in the head. Also, "put in" isn't a phrase, so like obviously that means Putin. Ukraine almost got in trouble because they had a song dancing Lasha Tumbai, and a bunch of Russians were like, you're not saying Lasha Tumbai, you're saying Russia goodbye. That's offensive. And the singer was like, nah, Lasha Tumbai is Mongolian for to shake cream. And then some Mongolians were like, that's not a phrase, that doesn't mean anything. So it's a really wacky thing. But yeah, I mean, usually it's you know, it's very normy, but it's also weird in its own way. European people have weird taste. And that's the thing about Eurovision is everybody agrees that the songs are generally really bad, but then everybody really violently, passionately disagrees about which ones are bad and which ones are good.
Hmm.
So it's never boring. It's never boring. And you get this really fun little appetizer sampler of just entries from like all over like the world besides America and Canada.
Hmm. Yeah, I was thinking about it really seems like, at least in terms of the United States, this is why I asked the question about, has it gotten more or less social justicey? It really seems like um, you know, SJW culture really peaked in 2015, but they weren't very good at trying to map out a long cultural wave. Like they thought that they could really start it in 2012 and that it would, I don't know, go all through maybe the first part of Hillary Clinton's administration. And they were really banking on this like steep, uninterrupted upward climb. And now it's like this botched mission that just makes them look insane. And you can look at things like the Marvel comic book universe, the cinematic universe, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's very clear that things were supposed to go a certain way. That all of a sudden they introduced Captain Marvel and she's just this like invincible, entitled white woman. It's like she's basically like if Hillary Clinton had been president, it would be her. And it's like, oh, it's kind of embarrassing considering Hillary Clinton isn't the president. And I wonder how many parallels they would have that in terms of Europe. But regardless, like, have any of you have either?
Europe has kind of already fallen to SJW, don't you know? Like, I mean, doesn't
Oh
it seem
yeah.
that way? Like,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, but like, have you guys noticed anything else that seems like that? Like, where it's like they're trying to push it in things where they already pushed it and people hated it, but they're still trying.
Well, I would say that definitely in terms of film, like at the Oscars were always like the most virtue signaling. uh, like you know, they'll be like, I don't know if scandal is the right word, but like with the whole Oscars So White and then Me Too. Like they're always trying to compensate for SJWs criticizing the Oscars or the movie industry. Look if I mean I'm trying not to care about it because I don't care about kind of trivial award shows, but it's just so funny to watch them like desperately um trying to make like Hollywood look so progressive and so social justicey.
Yeah. Yeah, during the Oscar So White thing, there was this female former friend on my timeline who's like, the most entitled white feminist girl who's been mediocre at best and slightly hardworking to put her sort of above the edge in terms of like, always being in the gifted programs and stuff. But it's like, if you actually got to know her, you'd realize it's almost unanimously just because she really, really prides herself on being smart. And then she really gets by on being the teacher's pet. And then she tried to be a documentary filmmaker in adult life. And of course, the only thing that she really has to offer is social justice stuff and, vehement white guilt, but only as long as she gets to pay her penance with intersectional feminism. And she was like, "What about Oscars so male?" And I don't know if I said it, but I was just kind of like, I mean, the obvious conclusion to the point where feminists think of this as a trope, but it's like, look, if you want to get Oscars, make a good movie. But as sad as it is to admit, like there aren't really that many or hardly any female directors that have made particularly good movies essentially ever. Like the only movie that I can remember that I have truly truly loved, which was directed by a woman, was A League of Their Own.
I was gonna say American Psycho. That was directed by a woman named Mary Harron, who hasn't really had any projects outside of that.
I thought that was an awful movie.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't like it. Um, Sophia's Coppola Lost in Translation was all right, but it was very, very obviously autobiographical. It's like, okay, she must have been with her dad when she was a teenager trying to blend into Japan, and it was weird. We get it. But
yeah,
and that's like, I don't know. I want to like have kind of like a backpedaling like, and I don't mean that women blah 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 blah, but I've worked in theater, and I've worked in film, and I've worked making YouTube videos to actually have a sense of how to make all of these things, directing, actors, cinematography, scoring, all of those things really, really come together and to actually make it work in terms of cinema is the most challenging artistic feat. And in order to actually be good at it, you have to have the type of drive which is abnormal for anybody. You have to be an absolute workaholic. And I think it's just one of those things where, like, yeah, you can come across some great female writers, you can come across, but there's just not going to be that many women who strive towards that level of perfectionism with all of these different things, because you have to be very, very self-sacrificing in ways that men are more like. When you say self-sacrificing, you mean like you will do things that actively harm your own individual welfare as a human being. You work yourself until you're unhealthy. You forget about eating well. You forget about exercising. You forget about spending time with your family. All of these different things that in most contexts would actually leave people to self detriment. And that's totally fair. And being like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be like that. But when it comes to like making a really, really great movie, that's how the really great movies get made.
yeah. I mean, I've been looking more into like the filmmaking process and the documentary making process just because I'm interested in that. And it's a lot of work, like to do anything that major, even if it's like a really turns out to be a really bad movie. Like there's still so much that goes into it. And I think from what I understand, men tend to have more of that single-mindedness than women do. You know, not to say that there aren't some women who have that too, but it's just a tendency that I think is more common in men, from my understanding.
Yeah, it's so incredibly rare, and then to have it be rare, or to have it be well rounded, to like really understand scoring, because I've done scoring for film, and it's really hard just to do that, and to even have a good sense of how a score should work. Like maybe you're not making the music, like I was making the music, but um you had to be obsessive to the point where you're going to sit there with the person making your score and be like, no, 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 I need it more of a build. I need, like to sit
Yeah.
there and have that type of hands-on obsessiveness. That's what it takes. And that requires somebody who really, really understands music. And it's like, okay, there's been a lot of great female authors, but comparable to a number of things. And there's certainly been a lot of good female photographers and stuff, but it's like, in order to have all of those bases covered, it's just going to be exceptionally rare, because it's exceptionally rare when a male makes a really, really great film. And so feminists complaining that they're not getting, one thing, like, because of the fact that uh um the the way that people appreciate films, if you make an undeniably good film, nobody's going to be like, well, I don't know, it's made by a woman, maybe we're not going to feature it in our award show. Like, that is like one of the things that the meritocracy is going to come through, you know
Yeah.
but though they definitely do shaft some people. Like, some people make these really, really great films that are really, really popular, and they don't like the director. Like, that does happen,
Right. That happens
but
a
it
lot.
certainly doesn't happen to women.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the most important factor. And then I think that this whole narrative of like oh, as a female director it's so much more challenging. I think that what it does is it kind of indoctrinates a lot of women who maybe potentially could be really good directors, and then they're really passionate about it, but because they've been poisoned with this ideology, whatever they produce has to be this thing where it's about being a woman and being a martyr, and then they have to make themselves like oh, I struggled over all this adversity. And it's like, maybe if she just dropped that whole angle of it and had just focused on actually creating a thing for its own sake rather than just for the sake of because I'm a woman. Like, I wonder, what little, how rare it is to begin with, if it becomes even more rare in light of that influence as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then, but I do also empathize with that feeling of frustration, because no matter who you are, it's really hard to direct a film. Like, even if you have the money to get it made, it's really going to be hard to get people to like get on board with your vision. Like, you have to, like, I know this from doing my animation, explaining to people what it's going to end up looking like, even though it doesn't exist at all. Yeah, people, my actors and stuff, were, I'm not going to, this is by no means insulting to them, but they were surprised by how well it came out, and that's understandable. And so if you're somebody who hasn't yet proved yourself, or, you know, um, most people's first film isn't really all that good. Almost everybody's isn't, because you learn so much in putting your first one together. And so I can understand, because of the type of thing that we're talking about right now, like talking about how women aren't really getting taken seriously, and maybe for perfectly fair reason. It's going to be hard for them to make that first film, and then they're going to have to make their next movie if they want to get better. And it would seem like this huge insurmountable obstacle, but that's where you kind of just got to suck it up and keep doing it. Like, don't talk about any sort of complaints about how people perceived it or what you've been through or anything until after you make your first movie that you're 110% happy with. And then if people are, ignoring you as a director or whatever, then you have something to complain about.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing when it comes to the STEM field. I mean, the field that I'm studying is more of the social science, so it's a little different. But I'm talking about mostly like the hard sciences. There's a lot of push there to try to get more programs for women in science, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Like, just encouraging people to go into certain careers, but the thing is, like there's this whole narrative being spun around it about like how science and tech is a male dominated field. If you're a woman, you're gonna have a harder time with it. But that's kind of like setting them up for failure,
Yeah.
Yeah. When you make a program to try to make it easier, it's defeating the whole point of it too. And now we have this problem where like a lot of women will get degrees and then they'll decide to stop their career and then be stay-at-home moms, and then they don't want to go back to work. And then that'd be fine if like they were kind of shouldering the burden of the schooling themselves, but they get to offset it to either their husbands or to like the taxpayer. And
Mhm.
that's a problem that not enough people, I think, are pointing out. That it's very expensive that we're educating a lot of women and then they're not in any way beholden to perform those tasks. Or, even when they do enter the workforce, maybe they're finding a way into just working like in HR or working like in like some other thing or working as like a project manager, but not doing like the hard like front line work of the field.
Yeah, actually, there would be a good term. I'm for this type of woman. It would be like a working trophy bride. Which, because one of the things I've noticed living in upper middle class or even around upper class people who were tech workers and stuff, is that the men who work in these fields, they expect extremely educated women to marry. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for a woman who's making six figures or more, and then they're going to consider settling down with them, including somebody like Mark Zuckerberg. His wife, I think, has a PhD and things like that, but obviously she's probably not really going to end up working 80-hour weeks with those, if she even works at all. I'm not really sure what the exact relationship is, but just getting your credentials to prove that you can make six figures so that you can continue to marry up. There should be a word for that.
Yeah, like I think that's definitely a phenomenon with intellectuals, wanting to marry other intellectuals or other people they perceive as intellectuals.
Yeah, because it's kind of it's completely unfortunate, because like this idea of women's equality in the workplace was supposed to have to do with necessity. Like, it was supposed to have to do with women who weren't married to men, had to leave a husband, who chose to have a career, and it's being abused by women who their ultimate plan is not to have the career. And like what Spacepan says, they are just going to drop out of the workforce, and it costs everybody a whole bunch of money. And it's like, this is where the public cultural shaming could maybe come in and do a few good things to encourage women to either commit or get out of the way.
Well, I think probably the best solution is we just need the like education is a massive bubble. It just needs to pop. We need to have deflation in the cost of education such that if you want to study something really in depth and even get up to this degree, it really shouldn't cost what it does. And then this doesn't make it this huge this huge issue, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like we just have this whole conception of education. It needs to be this big, rigorous, long schooling thing that's full time, and like we're just not being honest about what what the technology of education is now with the internet,
Yeah.
which is that I think that we can afford to have a much more casual and fluid approach to education, but that's going to mean that a lot of schools and teachers and like universities that they're in particular their administrations, their admin, they're going to have to find work.
Yeah.
But with cheaper education, they should be able to, and it should be more productive. It just needs to lose the structure it has now. It's very, very outdated, and it's been outdated for a long time.
Yeah. Matthew, what are you studying exactly?
Psychology and math. I'm just currently psychology because I'm trying to transfer, but hopefully I'll be when I am at a 4-year college, I'll be able to minor in math as well. I want to eventually go into like research or quantitative psychology, so like the more mathematical, experimental aspect of psychology.
Okay. Yeah.
I remembered earlier, a really great example of Eurovision getting woke was France's entry last year called Mercy, which was about a refugee child rescued from the ocean that they named Mercy. So France got the ultimate virtue award last year. I think that was peak SJWism at Eurovision.
Aside from the chubby woman chicken lady.
Oh yeah, but that was like throwaway SJ. That was just like sassy, empowered woman kind of. That's all pop music basically.
Was that like an entire subject change, by the way? Just back to what we were talking about before.
Sorry, it was on my brain and there was a pause.
Okay. Because I'm not sure if Matthew is finished talking about.
Oh no, I was finished.
Okay. It's just making. Well, yeah. I studied psychology, and for I think my first semester in university, and I decided it felt kind of like it was like counting stars, and I remember feeling like these are all things that I've sort of noticed to a certain degree in my real life. Like I wouldn't necessarily need a course to teach me this, because I'm social. But then I kind of realized, a lot of people aren't, and then things can be expanded upon. So I didn't pursue it anymore. But you know, there's definitely some good. Maybe you could do. I've actually thought about this. If feminism could be somehow classified as a personality disorder.
Yeah, that would be interesting to look at for sure. I think, well, the type of feminists that I tend to come across, like the Tumblr arenas, so called, like you know who I'm talking about, right? Like those like young girls or women who, um, you know, like it's even right down to the hair dye and the piercings and the like there's just a very specific subtype of people, and I think a lot of them do have some core mental issue, like some sort of attention-seeking issue, or usually some form of body dysmorphia as well, which they conflate with gender dysphoria. But yeah, I think at least that subtype of feminism is associated with personality disorders.
Well, see, I'm actually thinking that the overall worldview of female, females are the most privileged type of person. Like there's no better systemic perk and social perk than being female in our society. And for people to somehow, in the face of all logic, decide that they are oppressed at the same time, like that's not normal, but it's also encouraged. Like, it's not like they just came to that conclusion. It's being brought out in them. And so like some sort of like uh social hysteria type, peer pressuring, delusional way of thinking. I feel like there has to be a psychological observable thing about that.
Yeah.
I think one issue is you have a lot of people, like a lot of issues in psychology have to do with social settings. And what the internet's done is it's kind of created this place where there's this room and everybody is in it, which was not possible. And I think that it's going to take a very long time for people to really start unpacking the implications of that. Because we generally view the internet as kind of an antisocial thing, but I think that now that social media has become so mainstream, now there's, I think people are going to have to start thinking like this is part of society and part of the social nature of things, and I think that people, are being affected by it, and that the ways they're being affected by it are really surprising and unique.
Mm-hmm.
I
Like,
actually,
yeah, it's a
I
strange new phenomenon.
because I have something coming up. Um,
Okay.
so
Yeah, that's what you said before. Okay, well, Matthew, it was great to have you on.
thank you.
And if you would, you should get a PlayStation 4 and we can play some video games together.
Okay.
Okay, I hope you had fun.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
So, um, are we going to talk for a little bit more?
Yeah, I still have some time.
Okay.
Let's see, it's about 7:30 here. So I don't know, within like an hour I'd probably wanna head out. But I
Well,
don't know if
we've been
it's going
going for, yeah, we haven't been going for that long, so we could go for maybe another 10-15 minutes. Maybe, hey guys in the chat, now's about your time to give me some super chat. If you want to maybe come up with a topic of conversation that we could talk about.
throughout the week I'll notice things and then I'll think, oh, I should bring this up, and then I forget. I should keep a notebook.
Mm. Well, I am excited about my men on strike thing because, as it stood for the past number of years, there's been no legitimate women's issue at all to speak of. It's basically just like, not only do we already have everything, but if you won't openly express at all times that you're willing to give us even more if we ask, then we're going to ruin your life. That's sort of been the attitude of feminism. Whereas now they actually are asking for something and they forgot how to ask for things like real people. So I think men should proclaim that they are going on strike until they start treating us like actual humans.
Yeah, Counter-Strike, I guess. That's a video game. Yeah, I mean, it is bizarre. I guess I'm not really sure what to add to, like, the idea of the first strike was so bizarre to me that they think it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's so basic.
Well,
Just
I'm
like,
not saying a sex strike.
oh, you're saying like a strike from like helping women.
Yeah, just like, hey, you actually want something done at a governmental level. We don't have to help you at all, even if we agree with you.
Yeah, I think that just it's the problem though is that the more something like that gains traction, the more incentive you have for men to step up and bait a cock out of it.
That's true. But it could start a conversation, like
It can start a conversation.
Anita Sarkeesian pretended she wanted.
Yes, it can start a conversation. I mean, that's totally fair. But yeah, but that's it reminds me back of this old video that Allison Tiemann made about she called it the apexual male. That's what I always think about, and it kind of explains this tendency of men to kind of backstab. It's like why they don't really, like, men will cooperate as a group, but they won't cooperate as a group like for themselves as a group.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they'll cooperate for women, but
Yeah.
maybe that'll change. I mean, there's definitely changes happening. There's more kind of niches within the manosphere starting to gain a foothold, but
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to know. It's hard to know what's really important, like what's really getting a lot of traction. Because if you have like 1,000 new people that enter the manosphere, whether they're MRAs or MGTOW or whatever, it looks really, really significant, but is that even keeping up proportionally with like population growth, right? If you have like 2,000, blue pill men that you're not hearing about, how are we really weighing things? So,
Mm-hmm. But see, that's why I think it's such a good opportunity to because like, okay, yeah, sure, maybe it will cause 40 times the amount of, male feminist dude bros getting to prove to the women how much the one good man they are by standing up against the man who, the men who want people to actually care about their systemically denied rights, habitually, uh, nonstop in every place, men's rights that are being denied, that should be human rights. And, but it will just advertise it. The Streisand effect could exist, you know? And
that's a good point. And a lot of the blue pill types really have a bad habit of marketing themselves in a bad way.
yeah, well, and it really, really is a question of like, they just don't know the issues. They don't do anything. They thought that they had it all made. To them, they became a feminist some number of years ago, and now it's just re-education or further education for just how crazy of a feminist they actually are, that they keep reminding themselves of. It's never actually about, really thinking about the issues ever. And that's what the system wants out of them. The system wants them to continually remind themselves for different reasons why, as men, they should be serving women. And that's all it wants. And so when they get disrupted by something that makes them furious, and oh boy, it makes them furious when you actively say, no, how about you do something for us for once? They like the women get furious, and then the men see the damsel in distress, and and then at that point, you can start to get through to these people. Like, you can get them to at least think about it, because you're forcing them to. They'll see the opportunity as an opportunity where they are 100% convinced that they have something to argue in favor of, because there's never a reason for feminists. It doesn't stop them, but there's never actually a reason for feminists to get into arguments. They do it anyway just because they, for whatever degrees of self-guilt or peer pressure that motivates them to actually do these things, they will engage in arguing, but they don't actually have something that they can point to that's like, hey, this is, women are being treated unfairly in this way, except for when it comes to this type of issue, which is so exceedingly rare that it almost never exists. And so you can just easily start the conversation, forcing them to, dust off the old gears in their brain and actually think about what they feel for women's rights. And by saying, no, I don't care, and I'm going to continue not caring, They then are forced, in order to argue with you, which you guarantee that they will when they try to get you to care, are forced to think about male issues in the process, which is actually huge. Oh
Yeah. I mean, oh yeah, are you looking at a Sunflower Girls question?
yeah, no, but hey, Sunflower Girl, I'd be way more inclined, because I really, really am broke, if you sent me a super chat. But we could get into that at some point. So sorry, what were you gonna say, Span?
Oh, I was just gonna say, oh, what was I gonna say? Oh no. Oh, I guess yeah. For them, arguing is always a losing game because feminism, and it kind of ties into Sunflower Girl's question. At least I think it does. There's not really a distinction between radical feminism and other feminisms because it's all based on a comparative claim, and they never actually did the comparison. They just assumed that women have it worse. And that's why they can't win an argument. They can't win and actually have like a real conversation. They can only dismiss and mock you when you bring that up. And that's why it's gonna be, oh, what about the men's, right? That old meme. That's all they have. And if they're trying to go from a perspective of like persuading people, that's their best option. Their best option is to not engage. Or I suppose they can do what they've been doing, which is what they've been doing for decades, which is pretending that what they're doing actually is addressing men's issues, which is a very old tradition that so surprisingly, apparently feminists have been doing this excellent job of really looking at gender in this balanced way and really totally working on men's issues, yet nobody is aware of any men's issues until MRAs bring them up, you know?
Yeah.
They've been doing this masculinity studies thing, talking about toxic masculinity and men need to get in touch with their emotions and blah, blah, blah. They've been doing this for decades. And surprisingly, most people are unaware of most men's issues. So just imagine that, have them square that circle.
Yeah, it's a thing. Ryan the house, that is actually rude. Please don't ask such questions, especially while I'm thinking on a stream. So let's see, I'm gonna give a moment before we talk about things maybe having to do with radical feminism.
Yeah, I'm continuing in my streams reading sections of Women Respond to the Men's Movement, 1992. Almost halfway through, which actually was a lot quicker than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I would still be
frustrating fucking book. I'm sorry, frickin' heckin' book.
I would still be interested in joining you for those. So don't write me off just because I have been on a really, really weird sleep schedule.
Yeah, well, last week that's kind of what happened to me. Is I woke up at like the worst time, and then I was just I just wanted to sleep, and then I eventually was like, no, I'll at least get a couple of things to do. But then I was late, so then I was like, I don't know if I want to send people links if I'm like late or whatever. So I want to try to start it on the same time. I don't know. I guess I should really commit to a time.
Okay, so we can talk about radical feminism. So this is actually going to be in a video that I have been writing the script of and revising a bit. The thing is about radical feminism is that radical feminism, in terms of like the original definition, that's the real feminism. And current feminism is just female supremacist communism. It literally is. I have a video called Intersectional Feminism is Communist Particle Board, and it explains how mainstream feminism, what radical feminists would call liberal feminism, it's really just rooted in the United States Communist Party, and that's all that it actually is. So the original definition of feminism was entirely based in so many words. There's a number. It was from a French male socialist philosopher, and he coined the phrase. But it was entirely based around him saying that a society, the best judge of a society is how many rights it gives to women, and obviously feminism has never changed from that. It's just seeing the world strictly in terms of how well the females benefit from this, and the idea that they somehow manage to, I don't know, even convince people that changing the definition was even remotely acceptable when it clearly nothing has changed about it is baffling to me. Um, but radical feminists openly admit that they're not doing anything for men, and they own that. Whereas intersectionals are more dangerous to me because intersectionals have legitimately helped themselves or convinced themselves into thinking that they have the way and they know the way, and that it's non-binary communist utopia where everybody is referred to by gender neutral pronouns, except for women always have privileges at the same time, and these things just don't make sense, and that's but it's managed to become quite the popular narrative, whereas radical feminism has never really been all that popular. So when I say Sunflower Girl was asking me in Matthew C's comments, she was saying that radical feminists are worse. um I will say that they generally do tend to be worse people, because they're just completely vile, and it's so easy to say nobody could be any worse than intersectionals, because they're horrifically bad. But I think a lot of their horrific behavior really comes in the form of peer pressure and that kind of critical mass mentality of thinking that they're winning. Intersectionals, because of their totalitarian nature in terms of ideas, they won't actually accept that there's other ways of viewing the world, which is why I guess it's supposed to be 9% of Americans are progressive activists. They actually think they're winning because they are so dead set on expelling alternate viewpoints from their social circles, from their universities, anywhere that they can shut them down. And that mentality becomes really, really dangerous. Whereas radical feminists know that they're an underdog, though if you mess with them, I mean, if you make them mad at all, then they will, nothing, you've never faced the insanity of the wrath of these people. Like, they will just lie and lie and lie, and it's really absurd. So
Well, and I've always kind of had more respect for people who take the really radical stance because I feel like if you step into that worldview and you accept it as true, their reactions kind of make sense. Like, I can totally see how if you really do think these things are true, like, you would act in that way. And the fact that they're acting in that way to me feels more genuine and feels more honest. Whereas when you have this sort of moderate view, it's so much more just like wishy-washy and like and it's harder to like really pin down, and then it's harder to have a conversation. I think if everybody would just kind of go more radical, we could at least kind of hash out things and kind of see where the differences are because like things aren't hidden so much.
mhm. Oh, and Ryan the House says that he's in, or she might be Ryan can be a female name, is in a server with radfems, and there's a bunch of commies in it. Well, I'd be curious to know what their level of Marxism actually is, and if they call themselves that, if they don't call themselves that, because the original definition of feminism was coined by a socialist, and socialism in more instances than not is basically just shorthand for communism. It's often people that see the world culturally in the same way as communists do, but they make some sort of differentiation, which is really just a formality, and in many cases, or they are just wrong. They call themselves communists, but communists theoretically did not want what the radical feminists that were originally around said that they wanted. And that's why Marxists and feminists were actually at odds with each other up until the second wave, because the Marxists thought that the feminists were self-centered and that they didn't actually want equality. And that was the whole thing about communism. But things ended up changing because as the Communist Party grew to be more and more focused on making the women happy, and this happened through basically through trial and error and happenstance, like Communist Party in the United States, like this all really came, intersectional feminism came from the United States. And the thing that kind of happened is that it didn't really take off, but it was very successful. In a number of women got involved in the movement, and then when all of the men went off to World War II, the women kind of got really powerful within the movement, and then they didn't want to go back to the kitchen or whatever when the men got home. And so that's how things ended up kind of they became this weird thing where they thought they were communists, but they were really just feminists that had some sort of global totalitarianism in terms of what they aspired to be like.
It's almost like like the Ring of Power. Like if you're fighting for women, right? That's like the thing that gives you all the power. And I feel like these Marxists, they tried to take that and use that as momentum to get their true end goal. But along the way, people realize, oh no, we can just take it for our own view, right? And it's always had this common denominator of like just giving women free stuff. But then at different times, people have tried to kind of hijack it to make it, have their extra bells and whistles. Their extra bells, hooks, and whistles. Their extra bells, hooks, and rape whistles.
Wait, say it again. The whole thing.
Basically, like with Marxists, they realized that they could that they could use the pursuit of female interests as a vehicle to get their eventual end goal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I believe that appealing to the gynocentric nature of the populace was the only way that communism actually took off. It didn't take off until a year after Marx died, when Frederick Engels wrote the book The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State. And Frederick Engels co-authored the Communist Manifesto, even though the vast majority of people haven't even really heard of him. He was Marx's patron, gave Marx an allowance, but a lot of people were like, see, he's the co-author. So if he says that women are slaves to men, then we have to listen to everything that this guy says. So now it's a feminist thing, which, probably wasn't really the case overall, but that's when it became popular because, women hear free stuff from the government. I don't have to worry about my husband and brothers and father providing for me. You sold me in a miraculously huge percentage of cases.
Yeah, and I do think it's weird because I guess I'm not really sure what I'm thinking.
Ryan said, rad femmes tend to hate each other from my experience. Oh yeah, rad femmes hate each other. All feminists hate each other. It's the funny thing about feminism. You can never talk to a single feminist who's not gonna vent about how much she hates other feminists. Even if she's the most radical, crazy one, she will find something to complain about with other feminists. If it might just be simply that they aren't radical enough for her, or um, most feminists will always talk about the bat ass insane radicals, and and they're like, oh, I'm not like that, those are just the radicals, except for they do believe in all sorts of universally radical positions, and they don't know that certain things that like they oh, those are just the radicals talking about that. But I mean, I can understand their point. 1 in 5 women do get raped on university campuses. It's like, okay, you're radical enough right there if you believe that BS.
Well, and then I think within the radicals, it's necessarily going to lead to purity tests. Like you right, because that's the essence of the radical, is that you're having the most pure standard. And then if you have different flavors of radical, of course they're going to be even more at odds with each other, right? Like the TERFs versus like eco-feminists are pretty viciously critical of each other.
Yeah. Wait, what's the eco-feminists again?
Eco-feminists, they're flavorfully my favorite feminists. They have beliefs about the nature of, well, like nature, and they believe that basically humanity has this really this patriarchal instinct of like domination, because for them, patriarchy also has to do with conquering and taking over nature, and they believe that when you have a balance of male and female power, you start to see more of a respect for nature. So it really is just incorporating a lot of environmentalist ideas into radical feminism. And of course, a lot of like gender fluid and kind of more non-binary types, they really don't like this because they see it as very dualistic, because it's tying a lot of conceptions of the masculine and the feminine with women and with men and with all of these other things. And a lot of eco-feminists actually are like they're like, oh wow, you're right, because they don't want to come off as very domineering and patriarchal, so they kind of always have to bend the knee to everything. But that's sort of like their game plan. So they're very fascinating.
Yeah, I guess this is sort of what happened. This like merging disparate group type phenomenon thing is sort of what happens when everybody. When you're talking about groups that each and every one of them very, very, very passionately believe in something that is unanimously false.
And that's the thing, is feminism, it's based on a lie, but when you have different flavors and kinds of it, they're just finding different points at which they can kind of square up with that lie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, well, if this is true, then does this mean true? Well, no, that doesn't mean it's true. And it's like, well, by all the logic that we all agree upon, it would mean it's true. No.
And that's the thing, is if somebody has like a conclusion that's wrong, you can accept their conclusion and then work with their logic. And at some point, you're going to say, oh, well, here's where your logic doesn't fit. And they'll say, no, 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 it does. And you say, okay, well, let's accept that now. And now we'll keep going. And then, it's going to burst out at the seams somewhere else.
Yeah.
And each of those places where they're contesting it not working is, I think, where you find that each of these new, like, radical different forms of feminism find a home.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking we go until the hour, because eventually I'm going to want to go and get some food and watch Game of Thrones, because I am excited. Are you a fan?
Oh, are we competing with that? Is that happening now? I guess it must
No,
be
no, I'm
happening
not
about.
technically yet. In an hour.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I mean, I like the show. I think I'm in the camp that most people are in. Like, the first 4 seasons were awesome,
Yeah.
and then it kind of slowly started to lose, kind of lose the shine. This season I'm not a fan of. I'm
This
keeping
season
up with
is
it.
horrifically awful. The only reason
Yeah.
I'm really excited is because I've had this long-standing prediction that it's going to end up Braun, as in the guy who first entered into the show when he saved Tyrion by being his advocate knight, fighting on his behalf, and then befriending the Lannisters. He trained Jaime how to fight with one hand. He was hired by Cersei to assassinate Daenerys. He's tried twice. Third time's the try. Third time's the charm. I think that he will likely win because George R.R. Martin is a very intelligent man who believes in certain things very strongly, and he would be the type of guy that would have the person who ends up on the Iron Throne somebody who earned it, somebody who's fair, somebody who's well-rounded.
Wait. You mean Davos?
No,
You
I
mean
mean
Bronn?
yes,
Like the kid in the wheelchair now?
that's Bran.
Who am I thinking of? Bronn. Oh, that guy. Okay, I looked it up.
Yeah,
Bronn.
yeah. There's been all sorts of. I've been predicting this since like season 4 or so, maybe season 5, and it's only seemed more and more plausible. And so I think that George R.R. Martin would be the type of guy that would end the story with a person on the Iron Throne who is, Robert Baratheon, the original king that died at the beginning of the series. He fought his way onto the throne, started a great house, basically kind of earned it. Everybody else on the show doesn't deserve it for some reason or another. Bronn would if he did this, and he rose himself up from obscurity. I just feel like it's the kind of thing that George R.R. Martin would want. And though obviously the new writers have done a lot of things that George R.R. Martin hates, I do believe that they will give him the ending that he envisioned. And so I'm very invested in seeing if my prediction comes true. That's really about all.
I think though, didn't the ending leak? I think.
No, don't tell me if it did.
Yeah, I think the endings have leaked.
Well,
I didn't read them, so I don't know.
okay.
What I thought they should have done with Game of Thrones, and like obviously they could never have decided to do this from the beginning, but in hindsight, knowing that the series was going to be what it was, and knowing that it was going to, like, I guess, need to finish before he could complete it, or I guess just knowing that he wasn't going to complete it, what I think they should have done is made it a shorter storyline, one that wraps up within like 3 seasons, but then for like the 4th season, you go back and you redo it, except where the characters make different choices, and then you do super series. Yeah, you do 3 different super series that have radically different endings.
Boring.
No, because if it's supposed to be a game, the whole point of a game is like the choices that they make, and that like nobody's gonna be satisfied with any ending.
Notoriously weird.
That would be so good. It would be so good because like that's the point of a game, is they have different players and each of them are supposed to have like an equal chance of like possibly winning.
Clearly
And it'd be
viewing this as a fucking an effing RPG.
It'd be way cooler that way, I think. I thought Cersei should have just won. Like whatever. Like if you're gonna kill the Night King that easily, you might as well just let Cersei be the winner.
Yeah. Well, I don't believe that she's dead.
I don't want to believe that she's dead.
I feel like with Cersei, the literal character that everyone wants to see die, knowing for sure that she is dead, they wouldn't kill her like that.
Yeah, I think the directors though they said they like thought it was kind of a respectful send off.
Or maybe they were just lying.
They could have just been lying.
Because no one thinks of it as a respectful. No, everyone wants to see Aya cut her throat, glaring over her or something.
I don't want to see that. I can't relate.
Well, You would be a minority.
I guess, yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
and like it's way too fast paced too. They haven't had enough episodes to really milk out what they're supposed to
Oh yeah, it's
for it
god
to
awful.
really make sense.
It's completely god awful. Okay. On that, it is the hour, so I'm gonna go eat the little amount of food that I have at my house. And guys, just so you know, I am doing sessions of hanging out, giving writing feedback to people, potentially even full rewrites, edits. And I've actually recently ghost written for somebody. And if you want to do that, hit me up about prices. People are repeat customers, so I'm actually pretty good at this. In case you're not good at writing, but you're considering getting more into something like that, I am a resource. And otherwise, I'm going to be probably selling stuff on Postmates, which maybe won't even be all that bad. I don't know. Okay. Anything you want to say, Spaceman?
No, just as fun to have a chat. And I have my live streams in the middle of the week reading from Women Respond to the Men's Movement. So if anybody's interested in some really infuriating, semi-retro OG radical feminism of them pretending they care about men's issues, or even not even bothering to pretend they care, just straight up mocking the early men's movement, then you might enjoy or hate Boner with me, this little tome I found. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm up to. Otherwise, I'll
Okay.
just be here as usual.
Yeah, the women who make the decisions about men's well-being are the ones who were motivated enough to get into positions of power in feminism, meaning they do not care. Because otherwise, women who do care about men, they usually kind of talk the talk instead of walking the walk professionally. So it's a weird position. Explore that on his stream.
Yeah,
Talk.
needless to say, the proof's in the pudding.
Okay, talk. Uh, if you want to know when, maybe he'll have one on his channel reminded, because I don't think he has it entirely pinned down.
It's Thursday mornings for me, which is Wednesday evenings for people in America.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.